Everybody, welcome to the video. It's Saturday, June 19th. We'll be breaking down both slates that we have over on DraftKings today. Saturdays are great, but unfortunately we're a little bit hit or miss if we're going to get a split slate or not, and as you guys know, I'm not a big fan of the split slates, but unfortunately we got one today, and it's a pretty big one. We have every single team going, all 15, and we have an 8-game early slate starting at 1:05 p.m. Eastern today. Then the 7-game main slate tonight starting at around 7:15 p.m. Eastern. So lots of options to talk about, each and every single team going. And I'm going to be covering both within this video. And if you just look at the matchup info column in the top left of your screen, then look at time. If they start from 7 and later, they're on the late main slate tonight. And if they start before 7, that means they're on the early slate today. So it shouldn't be too hard to understand that. And if you guys do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you want to follow me over on social media, I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter, cpen16 over on IG. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that if you do want to join the community. Projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff, link is down below. And I do cover other sports as well. If you want to check out the NASCAR video, posted that yesterday at 7 o'clock. It's my favorite DFS sport, so I really do think you'll enjoy it. But I think that's it for the plug, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we'll start with the pitchers and move on to the bats. And with there being all 30 teams playing today, you'd think there'd be some good pitching options, but there's like not one pitcher I am super confident in this slate. Like there's a bunch of okay options and okay pitchers and okay to medium-ish matchups, but there's not like a pitcher out there that really stands out to me. So it's very interesting because usually there's at least one, but today I'm not getting a vibe from really any of these pitchers, so we're just going to have to kind of eat it a little bit. But we'll start up top with Walker Buehler, $11,100. He's your ace of the late slate tonight. It's a pretty good matchup versus Arizona, although I wouldn't say it's the most cakewalk matchup in the world, but only a 3.6 implied team total against him. Pretty heavy favorite, 7K prop as well. And his numbers so far this season are solid. I wouldn't say they're elite, but they are solid. Really nice 2.38 ERA, but the xFIP and Sierra closer to 4, which I don't love. Strikeout rate below 25% for a guy that's over $11,000 doesn't really sit too well with me. Fortunately, he doesn't really walk many guys. Whips below 1,000. ISO at 144. Gets a decent amount of ground balls. Only a 200 batting average allowed. Don't like the 35% hard contact rate he's allowing. But Arizona this season versus righties, they haven't had much power. Only a 133 ISO. Woba below 300. 83 WRC plus. Striking out at around a 24% clip. I wouldn't say he's my most favorite play in the world, but given the pitching options we have, I think he will be viable tonight. Going down to the ace of the slate on the early slate, we have Aaron Nola at $10,500 going up against the Giants, who have not been a bad offense so far this season, but they've been way better versus lefties than they have versus righties. And Aaron Nola's been okay this year. 3.79 implied team total against him. Is a slight underdog here, 7K prop, but looking at his numbers so far this season, ERA is at 3.69, but unlike Walker Buehler, his xFIP and Sierra numbers are better than his ERA. 3.51 xFIP, 3.42 Sierra, really nice 27.6% K rate, although I wish it was a little bit more because, you know, typically we'll get DeGrom in this close price range, and he's got a near 50% K rate, so it just doesn't feel as great paying that much money for a guy that's at a 28% K rate, but not bad given the options that we have. Doesn't really walk many guys. This is giving up a 241 batting average and a 157 ISO, but nothing too concerning. And like I said, the Giants have been better versus lefties than they have versus righties. Looking at their splits this season, some overall really like elite numbers versus left-handed pitching. And they're still good versus righties, but they are striking out at 26% clip. And Woba is at 325, 108 WRC plus, 191 ISO. It's a little bit scary there. A little bit scary, so I'm not in love with Aaron Nola here, but he is a good pitcher. And just raw points-wise, I think he's a good projection play. Dropping down to some more mid-range pitchers, and I don't think you absolutely have to play these expensive pitchers today. If you want to forego those guys and go kind of mid-ranges to cheapest today, I think that could be a viable option, but we're going to have to see how roster construction plays out later in the day. But we have Alex Wood here, $8,700 and a decent matchup versus Philly. They do have some decent bats. Guys like JT Realmuto and Rhys Hoskins can definitely give trouble to lefties, but I think overall Alex Wood should be fine. He's been a really solid pitcher for the most part this season. He's had a couple of bad outings, but for the most part, he's actually been very solid. Only a 3.71 implied team total against him. He's pitching at home. He's a slight favorite here. It's a pitcher-friendly park in San Francisco, and his numbers this season, 3.6 xFIP, 3.74 Sierra, kind of pitching exactly what his ERA says he should be pitching. 24% K rate. Walks are a little bit up there at 7.5%, but he gets a lot of ground balls, 55% ground ball rate, and limits the hard contact, so I think Alex Wood should be fine versus Philly. Don't mind that price tag either. Patrick Sandoval, $8,600. Really good matchup versus Detroit. Anytime there's a lefty on the mound versus Detroit, he's not an absolute trash can. He's going to become in play because Detroit's just really like such a bad team versus left-handed pitching. Like the numbers are absolutely putrid. They've gotten better in the WRC plus department than they were earlier in the season. I think like a month in, they were sitting at around a 30 WRC plus, which is a number I don't think I've ever seen before that far into a season. But it's definitely improved. 77 now. I say improved. It's still terrible, but 124 ISO, striking out around a 30% clip, only a one. I think I already mentioned that 124 ISO, 290 on base percentage, 282 WOBA. Just some really, really bad numbers. And the Angels are very heavy favorites here, so I would not be surprised if Patrick Sandoval, assuming he can pitch deep enough into this game, would pick up the win. And sitting at a 3.51 ERA this season, acceptancy around 4, which I don't love, but a 22% K rate. Will give us some power, but fortunately enough for Patrick Sandoval, this Detroit team does not really pose much of a power threat here. So for $8,600, I don't expect them to go super deep into the game, but I think there's some strikeout upside here, and I will take that at $8,600. Also, there's not many great pitching options on the late slate today, so we're with limited options here, unfortunately, for such a large overall slate. Although it's a smaller slate compared to the early slate, only by one game though. And then dropping down to Alex Manoah, $8,100. So I'm against the Baltimore Orioles in Camden Yards, which is not something I'm super excited about. But he's only had like one bad start, and other than that, he's actually been pretty solid so far this season. It's only a 20-inning sample size, so I hate to put too much into it, but he has a really nice 2.6 ERA. Now, the XFIP and Sierra are about 2 runs higher at 4.58 and 4.2, but he's got a decent 25% K rate. Is walking some guys, but giving up less than a 200 batting average. Giving up a lot of fly balls, though. Close to 50% with the ground ball rate below 40%, but only 30.2% hard contact rate. In Baltimore, while there is some decent bats in the lineup like Cedric Mullins, Trey Mancini, and guys like that, I think Manoah's fine at $8,100. I think he's just a decent mid-range pitching option on the early slate tonight. I wasn't seeing any dirt cheap pitchers like on the early slates. So I think Manoah might be the lowest I want to go as of right now. Then dropping down to the cheapies here, they're both on the late main slate tonight, but we have Logan Gilbert and Austin Gomber. Logan Gilbert kind of scares me a little bit because the matchup versus Tampa Bay can be a bit scary, but the same thing goes for Austin Gomber considering he's pitching in Coors Field, so I guess they both have their weaknesses here, but I'm mainly just trying to chase their 25% K rate at their price points, and plus the team total for the Tampa Bay Rays is decently low here, 4.27. I think Logan Gilbert is definitely going to be a good pitcher down the line. So far this season, though, hasn't exactly been great. The ERA is at 4.1, but the XFIP and Sierra, well, XFIP's are around 4.6. Sierra's right around where its ERA is, but a 25% K rate. Not really walking many guys. Only a 161 ISO given up, which isn't, it's not super small, but it could be worse for his price point. Is giving him some fly balls, 36% hard contact rate's not great, but only a homer per 9. In the Tampa Bay Rays, while they do have plenty of power versus right-handed pitching, guys like Brandon Lau, Austin Meadows are definitely threats here, and even the righties like Randy Arena, but they do strike out quite a bit. So that's the one. It's kind of hard to use pitchers against Tampa Bay, but it does grade out well due to strikeouts because they do have power. 174 ISO, 109 WRC plus, 320 WOBA. I don't think anyone's denying that. I'd prefer you to use lefties versus them because they have considerably less power and just overall or a weaker team versus lefties, but they still have a 26% K rate versus right-handed pitching. The team total is kind of making me feel a little bit better about it, so I think Logan Gilbert below 7K is still a decent option here. And then Austin Gomber, he's in Coors Field, which is a bit scary. He survived versus the Padres, and if he can survive versus the Padres with guys like Manny Machado, Tommy Pham, Trent Grisham, Fernando Tatis, one of the best players in baseball, I think he can be just fine versus the Milwaukee Brewers, who are just really not that great of an offense. I think they scored a few runs last night, but it's just not a very good team. I know their team total is above 5 here, but Gomber is consistently priced like he's a terrible pitcher, and that's just really not the case. And I think as long as he's probably going to give up a couple runs here, but if the strikeouts can be there and he can go enough innings and maybe pick up the win here, I think Gomber should be fine. I mean, he's got a 3.71 XFIP this season and 3.5 ERA, Sierra below 4, around a 25% K rate, only a 134 ISO given up, close to a 50% ground ball rate, not really giving up many homers. And Milwaukee, they don't really scare you too much. Around a 28.6% K rate versus lefties this season, 98 WRC plus. They do have some pop. I would say they've been worse versus righties this season, although they are striking out more versus lefties. But I think Austin Gomber should be fine for the price point. I know Coors Field's scary. It's definitely been warmer there recently, but for $6,600, if you want a cheap pitcher tonight, I think he definitely opens up the bats on the late slate. I would prefer him probably over Logan Gilbert, although I guess they both have their weaknesses. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the pitching, so we can move right over to the bats. Just want to mention, I found myself listing more early slate guys here just because they kept popping up more, so I guess the early slate's probably a better slate for the bats tonight. But anyway, we'll start with the catcher position. Up top, we have Salvador Perez, $5,500. I believe last time Martin Perez pitched, he got blasted in the first inning versus the Blue Jays, and then Ryan Weber came in and gave up like 13 runs after that. Not saying it's going to happen again, but Martin Perez is a guy that I can pick on quite a bit. I know he had a bit of a hot stretch earlier, or about a month ago, but I just don't like Martin Perez. I think he's a very below average pitcher, and the Royals this season have some guys that can hit lefties pretty well. So I know he's super expensive, but so far this season, Perez has been mashing once again with a 245 ISO, 287 batting average, 361 WOBA. Got quite a bit, doesn't really walk much at all, but if you're stacking the Royals, he's definitely an integral part of that lineup with the team total above 5.3 today. Will Smith at $4,300, one of the better hitting catchers in baseball. Team total kind of right on par with the Kansas City Royals. He's in the late slate tonight, so it's not many exciting bets in the late slate. I think the Dodgers are going to end up being very popular, and a couple of these guys really aren't that expensive. Guys like Gavin Lux, Will Smith, Chris Taylor is not super duper expensive, but you can stack these guys up for sure. And Will Smith's one of the better hitting catchers in baseball, close to a 200 ISO this season, 375 on base percentage. I think he's fine for the price point. Then in early slate, if you just want a dirt cheap catcher, he is absolutely free. And if you want exposure to pretty much the top offense on both slates today, Reese McGuire, $2,000. I know his numbers aren't great, 123 ISO and a 246 batting average, but it's as cheap as you can get. Left and right matchup here versus Dean Kramer. They're in Camden Yards, one of the best places to hit. You get the guaranteed ninth inning at bats because they're on the road. Team total above 5.6. Nothing not to like here for the Blue Jays, in my opinion. I know they kind of sucked last night, so maybe they'll lower their ownership a little bit. And if that's what happens, I think it's even better for us because I'm going right back to the well with them. Dropping into first base, we have Vladimir Guerrero. For reasons I just kind of mentioned with McGuire, I love all the Blue Jays, although obviously Vlad's 20 times the hitter that Reese McGuire is. On the season, he's batting 342, 465 WOBA, but a 333 ISO with a near 200 WRC plus. He crushes lefties, he crushes righties. It doesn't matter if you got the money for him. Love Vlad today. Jared Walsh, $5,400, very expensive, but he went deep last night. The lefties did give Urena some trouble. I believe Walsh went deep, and then Shohei Ohtani, which just makes sense. It's nice when things make sense. Like lefties get to Jose Urena, and what do you know? Two guys hit bombs off them. I think it was in the same inning, but Jared Walsh this season has been crushing right-handed pitching, and looks like Detroit's going to have Willie Peralta on the mound today. Should see a lot of the bullpen, so you can sign me up for all the Angels once again. Team total about 5.5 here. Paul Goldschmidt, if you need a cheap option, $4,100, gets Drew Smyly on the mound, who is not a terrible pitcher. And I'm not saying that the St. Louis Cardinals are my favorite stack today, but I think some of these righties like Tommy Edman, Paul Goldschmidt are some decent plays today. You could throw Dylan Carlson in there as well, because you know Goldschmidt over the course of his career has always had some decent power versus lefties. Isn't really showing it yet this season, but definitely think some of the righties here make some sense. If you're looking at Smiley splits this season versus right-handed bats, it's not the most pretty thing in the world. Give it up a 5.46 xFIP, only a 17% K rate, 351 open over a 200 ISO with a 2 homer per 9 and a 33% hard contact rate. So the righties do grade out pretty well for me here on the Cardinals, although again, I'm not really going out of my way to stack them up. Then dropping on a second base, I do not have a guy listed here on the late slate. We'll see if something pops up, but I cannot find anything I like at all. So hopefully if you have a guy that I'm obviously going to have to play one in the late slate, but we'll have to see what pops up. But that's right now. I have the only guys listed on the early slate here. But Merrifield, $5,400. The same exact reasons I mentioned with Salvador Perez, just like all the righties here. You could even use the lefties because they should get to the bullpen soon enough. And Whit Merrifield hasn't really shown his power this season, but typically a guy that hits for contact and always has stolen base upside. So if you're stacking the Royals, like the leadoff guy, Marcus Semien, $5,100. He's been on fire this season. You can also play him at shortstop. 290 batting average, 234 WOBA, 140 WRC plus. Will strike out quite a bit, but love all the Blue Jays, and he's going to be leading off, so makes all the sense in the world, in my opinion. Then Adam Frazier, $4,300. He plays for the Pirates, so he's always going to get a bit overlooked, and their team total is always gross, but he's been really good this season. He's having an all-star kind of season so far. 324 batting average. I know he's near the league leaders in doubles this season. Only a 134 ISO, not a big power guy, but he's been a doubles machine. He gets on base quite a bit. Going up against Cal Quantrill, who's not I wouldn't say he's an absolute trash can out there, but definitely isn't the best pitcher. So $4,300 for Adam Frazier. I know it doesn't feel great resting Pirates guys, but they did score 11 runs last night. Not chasing that by any means. It was like 10-11 yesterday for the Indians-Pirates game, which is pretty crazy, almost like a football score. But at his price point, you can play him. I also think Christian Arroyo in the early slate is viable at $3,400 if you want to go a little bit cheaper. And dropping out of third base, Rafael Devers, $5,600. Brad Keller was doing okay in his last start versus Detroit. Ended up leaving the game early with an injury. Looks like he's going to be back today. And I like Boston quite a bit. 5.65 implied team total, which is right on par with the Blue Jays. So on the early slate, you definitely have some decisions to make between the Blue Jays and the Red Sox. I personally prefer the Blue Jays, but you can't go wrong with either, in my opinion. And Devers this season has been crushing right-handed pitching. So if you got the money for him, don't mind Devers. I definitely think he'll go a bit overlooked, considering I think a lot of people will end up paying up for a guy like Vlad today and some of the Blue Jays. So I guess maybe the Red Sox could get a bit overlooked. So guys like Devers and Xander Bogaerts would definitely make sense if you want to look for lower ownership. Anthony Rendon, $4,500. He recently returned to the lineup. He's been pretty terrible this season, but if you're stacking up the Angels, it's kind of hard to leave him off a full-on stack. Team total about 5.5 here, decently priced. Then Kevin Biggio, $4,200. I could see him being pretty popular today, eligible at 2 positions. And if you're just going to look to get cheaper Blue Jays exposure, Biggio does make some sense. His numbers aren't super impressive this season, but he's sitting right in the middle of the order, 5.5. Dropping down to shortstop, his teammate Bo Bichette, for all the reasons I've already mentioned. Love all the Blue Jays here. Decent power, decent speed, decent batting average this season. He makes all this sense in the world, but he's very expensive, so you have to keep that in mind. Adalberto Mondesi, $4,400. If I'm playing cash games on the early slate, I'm probably getting to Mondesi here. He's kind of been on fire this season. I know he's had a break from early on, then he had a break because he was injured, and he's recently back again, but he's been really good this season, batting .345, .414 ISO, .197 WRC plus, over an 11 OPS, and over a 750 slugging. I realize those numbers are going to keep up all season long, but I like all the Royals here. I think it's a fair price point for him. Hits in the middle of the order. Love Mondesi here. You got some power and speed upside. Then if you're playing the late slate, I don't see how you go with anybody else but Gavin Lux here. $3,700. Should be hitting second with a right in the mound of Matt Peacock, and he's not a very good pitcher. Arizona's a decent place to hit, and team total about 5.5, or not 5.5, 5.3, and loving the Dodgers. I think they're definitely the best stack on the late slate tonight. So Gavin Lux, I think, makes a ton of sense, even though his numbers aren't great this year. It's just should be hitting near the top of the order. I like that price point quite a bit, and the position isn't that great on the late slate. Going down to the outfield, we have Mookie Betts at $5,700. Again, just stacking the Dodgers on the late slate, I think is the best way to go. He's been crushing righties for a couple seasons now. Shohei Ohtani, $5,500. He announced yesterday that he'll be in the home run derby, which is going to be very exciting. Ohtani's just such a treat to watch. The guy's insane. Great at pitching, great at hitting, has all the power in the world. He's super fast. I mean, he's just an absolute freak athlete. Gets him on the right in the mound here for the Tigers tonight. I really don't think it matters who's pitching against him. He's always going to be in play. But when we get a guy like Willie Peralta or whoever else that Detroit throws at us with the bullpen, you can play all the Angels here. So I like Ohtani, even though he's very expensive. But he's got a .345 ISO this season and a .615 slugging and batting .270 with over a .400 WOBA. And what more do you want out of the guy? He's an absolute stud. Dropping down to the mid-range, we have Alex Verdugo, $4,300. I always like playing Verdugo because he's always fairly priced. His numbers are good this season with a .290 batting average and a .176 ISO. Hits near the top of the order. The Red Sox typically have high implied team totals. Brad Keller is a very average pitcher at best. Team total at 5.65 here. Like Verdugo at that price point a lot. Justin Upton, $4,200. He's been surprisingly good this year in the power department. Had a good game last night. .236 ISO this season. .264 batting average. Really low on base percentage, will strike out quite a bit, but I'm just a fan of stacking the Angels. And if you're stacking the Angels, you can't really leave off if they're a leadoff guy. Randall Grichuk, if you're just stacking up the Blue Jays, I don't think I have to keep mentioning this, but you can pretty much play all the Blue Jays for the most part. Lourdes Gurriel is also in play. Kike Hernandez should be leading off for the Red Sox, and I think for obvious reasons, we talked about the Red Sox, so he's certainly in play. I'd prefer the lefties here, but you can certainly stack all these guys up. Jorge Soler, $3,700, cheap righty power versus Martin Perez, but be warned that Jorge Soler has been absolute garbage this year. He's batting below 190. 151 ISO is okay for his price point, but the other numbers are absolutely putrid. But if you're just looking for some cheap power upside and a good spot in the order, Soler makes some sense. Then Abraham Almonte, $2,800. I think the Atlanta Braves will probably end up being the second best stack on the late slate tonight. I didn't have any of them listed here besides Almonte, but you can play guys like Freeman, Acuna, Austin Riley, Ozzie Albies pretty much every single night. They do have a team total close to 5 here, but Almonte's been really good ever since he's been in the lineup this season. It's only 54 plate appearance sample size, and he's dirt cheap hitting cleanup, but 300 batting average, 432 WOBA, 250 ISO, 175 WRC plus, and an on-base percentage above 460. So if you just want to ride the hot hand here at a dirt cheap price point, and if you're playing the late slate, like on the early slate, I'm not sure how excited I would be about him because there's just so many good options, but there's not that many great options on the late slate, so I could see Almonte being very popular once again. But with that being said, guys, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out the NASCAR video if you do want to check out that. I think it's a very fun DFS sport. If you've never played it before, I really recommend it. It's very, very fun and entertaining. And yeah, pretty much be it. Follow me over on social media if you want. Check out the Patreon. Lots of extra stuff over there, and I think you would enjoy it. But with that being said, guys, I'll get out of here. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hope the weather is wonderful wherever you are. And check out the NASCAR content if you haven't already.